There it is. All right. Can you hear me? Okay, all right. The time is 2 p.m. So as Deputy Mayor, I will call the Tuesday, March 17th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting to order and wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day. So with that, I will ask, let's see, we'll begin with the land acknowledgement that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta District 11. We recognize that we stand upon the land that carries the footsteps of many Indigenous peoples, including the Nihilwak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis. And the city honors the First Peoples of this land and is committed to fostering reconciliation through relationship building, knowledge gathering, and education. And I see everybody in our audience is most likely a staff member, so I won't do any housekeeping. If you need to know where the bathrooms are, ask your neighbor. So with that, we will begin with an adoption of the agenda for March 17th. Councillor Nguyen. Whoops. A second. Okay.
I'm having flashbacks seeing you in that chair again. I'll move that the Committee of the Whole adopt the agenda for the March 17th Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated and presented.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to close the motion. Please cast your vote. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. With this, there is an opportunity for anybody who wishes to speak to any of these items through the delegations. But as I said, everybody is a staff member in the audience, I believe. I don't see anybody hiding behind you. And I don't believe anybody pre-registered for online. So we can go ahead and skip that part. So next I will ask for approval of the minutes from February 17th, 2026, Committee of the Whole. Councillor Randhawa?
Yeah, I move that we approve the minutes as presented and distributed.
Thank you. Are there any errors or omissions? Not seeing or hearing any, I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. We just need you to hit a button. Yeah. And that is carried unanimously. So for Committee of the Whole, we have 3 items that will be presented for information. Because it is Committee of the Whole, there is latitude given. You can ask questions, you can make comments. It's pretty well anything that you would like. As long as you're polite and respectful to the staff. So with that, the first item that we will be discussing is Public Works Yard Needs Assessment. Grant Schaefer. It's got a whole bunch of you listed on here, but I guess it's just you. Welcome, Grant.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Grant Schaefer, Director of Fleet Facilities and Engineering. I'm here today to present the results of the Public Works Yard Need Assessment. With me online today is Veronica Ardilla Vernaza with Cornerstone Planning Group, who worked with us to develop this assessment. As part of the 2024 budget, Council approved a study to assess the current state and future needs of the Public Works site. The first Public Works site first began development in the 1970s. Over time, buildings and lands have been added as the city and need for services grew. The site currently supports the parks, roads, utilities, sustainability, facilities, and fleet business units, as well as the Public Works and utilities and sustainability Public Works and Utilities and Sustainability Department administrative functions. During peak summer months, approximately 110 staff start and end their days at the site. The assessment looked at the current site needs as well as projected future needs as the city continues to grow over the next 20 years. The existing site is operating at or very near capacity. There is little space for storage of materials, and there is no space to store additional equipment that should ideally be stored inside. The original shops are beginning to deteriorate and can no longer support the needs of the larger, or have a difficulty, supporting the needs of the larger, more modern equipment being stored within them. The lands themselves are fragmented as a result of the piecing together of lands that were purchased over time. This creates pinch points and circulation challenges, which result in hazards, blind spots, and conflicting movements as equipment staff move throughout the site. Parking for staff, equipment, and city vehicles is limited. This results in some staff spaces being assigned within the yard itself to accommodate parking. This creates potential conflicts with personal vehicles moving through an active site. The site as it currently exists offers limited viable space for expansion within the current footprint without the need to redevelop and reconfigure existing spaces. The 20-year plan developed within the assessment projected the needs of the site going forward. To support the city's continued growth, expanded cold storage, outdoor parking, heated equipment parking, administrative, and support spaces are required. The redevelopment plan presented in the report tries to accommodate these needs within the current site footprint and breaks the plan down into immediate, short-term, medium-term, and long-term projects. The report also identifies that to meet the needs of the business units, additional lands will be required. The immediate needs include some parking delineation and the replacement of the Parks Quonset, or yellow tent as we call it. The parking delineation will be completed in 2026, with the Quonset replacement part of the facility's life cycle budget, which will be presented in the 2027 or 2028 capital budget. The short-term needs within the report begin the redevelopment of the site. The major project within the short term is the replacement of the existing old shops, with a new larger shop for equipment storage and parking, which will also include administrative and support spaces. To accommodate this project, temporary spaces would be required while construction is underway. With the short-term projects complete, the medium-term projects can commence. This includes the removal of JEG to expand outdoor parking and storage and the development of a satellite yard. In the long term, additional heated parking will be required, as well as relocation of the RV dump to improve traffic circulation, as well as some final site reorganization to create more efficient storage. While the report includes a large redevelopment plan, it's important to understand the plan within its context and its base assumptions. The redevelopment plan tries to accommodate the future needs within the existing site. These needs could be accommodated in other ways as opportunities arise. For example, a site could become available for purchase within the vicinity of the current Public Works yard. That could meet some of the future needs for storage, administrative space, and a satellite yard, reducing the requirement for redevelopment. If a suitable site were purchased, it could accommodate, as I mentioned, some of the warehouse and storage needs, allow for outdoor storage, office space, and support spaces. A strategic purchase could reduce the need and scope of site redevelopment, reducing the overall cost of the development plan. Other top opportunities may also arise over the next few years, allowing the satellite yard to be included in other projects in future development areas. The existing site can function within the short term, but as it becomes more congested, there is an increased operational risk both in terms of safety as well as site efficiency. As we move forward, next steps will include continued monitoring of real estate opportunities in the area. If something suitable becomes available that will reduce the redevelopment plans while accommodating future needs, it would be brought forward to council for consideration at that time. At that time, it would also include an assessment of the potential site versus the needs identified within the report, helping to identify what could be removed or adjusted within the redevelopment plan and the subsequent adjustments within the capital plan. Administration will include the immediate and short-term projects in the 10-year capital plan to ensure that they are captured, with the longer-term items being included within the horizon list as required. That is my very brief presentation, and I'll open it up if anybody has questions or for discussion.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll let council go first. Councillor Harris, just give me a second. Go ahead.
So Grant, thanks for the report. It doesn't surprise me a lot. And I'll make some comments, I guess, in due course. Are we currently in contravention of our parking bylaw and the fact that during the summer months we're taking up all of the on-street parking?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, I don't know that we're taking up all that. We are using some of the street parking. I don't know if we're in contravention of the bylaw. I'm not exactly sure what the numbers would require us to have, but we would probably be close.
Well, I think I think the planning people need to take a really close look at it to determine that you're not kind of in contravention of the bylaw. No, I'm just kidding, but I understand the concept of the parking issue. Do you honestly believe that taking the JEG building is not that bad from a structural standpoint? It's in pretty good shape, is it not? Because it was built in what, the 80s?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, it opened in 93 or 94. It is in good shape. It's a space problem, not a building facility problem with that one.
Yeah, but if we deal with the allocation of kind of subject areas like public works, parking, or parks and all that sort of stuff, then do we really have a congestion problem in the JEG building itself? I'm looking at it from the standpoint of taking down an otherwise perfectly good building just to make way for parking. I mean, there's a cost to demolish and there's a cost. So I'm not so sure I support that.
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, my hope over the years is that we'd be able to find a site that would accommodate a lot of the needs that we have and split the site. So you'd move some of the business units over and their administrative and support functions as well. So then JEG you'd get rid of the major congestion on the existing site and you wouldn't have to redevelop JEG. Would be the hope, I guess, I would look forward, but we had to have a plan in place for the lands we have.
Yeah, and I totally get that, and I think ultimately you kind of got to go to the dance with the person you brought. So ultimately, it is what it is. So what you're saying in relation to my first question is we aren't in contravention of our parking bylaws, so we're not likely to have the people from municipal enforcement coming to give you a ticket.
I'll say that in public. I don't know for sure if.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blizzard.
I don't think bylaw or RCMP are in the room and listening. I do have a couple of questions and concerns. I guess the overall it's good. I guess we got to make a plan. I didn't look too closely at even the medium or the long term because I think to me that's a little bit more of I don't know if wishful thinking is the right way, but it's way down the road, certainly after this council. So we won't have a say at that point anyways. But I do have a concern with the same building that Councillor Harris said, the JEG 30, just short, over 30 years old, to me is not old. If that was a house, most of the time you'd be going, we're not tearing that down. It's not 75 or 100 years old. So I don't know if there's another way to do it or like was done here in City Hall to add on. I guess it sits kind of in the middle, but I don't know. I guess I'm just concerned with that. There could be more efficiencies, but I totally understand the need for some of the replacements. How many acres? I know they talk square meters. I don't really get it. Do you know how many square meter or acres that site currently is? And if you could wish for the ideal site, how many acres would that be? Is it 50% more would work for us for 50 years or 25%?
So through the chair to Councillor Blizzard, the existing site is 11.6 acres.
Okay.
That helps. I'm just looking to see what the report suggests an additional 3.6 acres as a satellite yard. So that would be all told. So it would depend on what we could find and where as to what that site would be. I think the most efficient use would be tying it to another project or to a different site that's already got a development on it rather than a greenfield site and building everything back up. But that depends on what's out there at the time when we really get down to the crunch and what becomes available over the next few years.
So if we got a new 5-acre site, say, just for a number, could be more or less, but is there way to split some of that, or is it like, no, this all really needs to be in one yard?
Through the chair to council, Blizzard, I think if we kept it, I think that was the intent when we looked at it, is a satellite yard would be it could be either in the vicinity of the existing site within the Eastgate Business Park in that general area, or the bigger you could move some to the south end of the city so that you can split some groups and have them closer to where they're going to be doing their work instead of taking equipment across the city every day. And those are the things we'll look at as we move forward as to what makes the most sense and where that sits. And a lot of that'll come as part of what opportunities may arise as we move forward.
Okay, I guess good to be open to that and see what happens as we move on. Do the essential stuff. Some of it looks like it definitely needs to happen. One other question. I saw in all the information we got that we got a listing in there. Do you know why that was included? Is that just for our information of prices, or is that something you're looking at, or?
Through the chair to council, it was just an example of what's out there.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that it's the right site. It was just an example of what's available today.
And the cost. Okay, that's all for now.
Okay, Councillor Wesley, second here. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you for the presentation, Grant. Just curious about as we move forward with this. Maybe I should ask one clarification before I get too carried away. So this plan here, I'm just judging from the questions that we've had and the answers, this is more aspirational. That other than the yellow tent, what is absolutely necessary?
Through the chair to councillor Wesley, so the immediate term the yellow tent needs to happen. It's not in good shape at all. The other things are just like the old shops are nearing the end of their life, and we need to do something with those. They're 55 years old. No, sorry, 55 years old. They've been through a lot. So there's some things there that are coming up that are kind of in the shorter term. So it kind of highlights that, and then it helps us when we go out, whether we're looking to replace the existing or going out for something else in the meantime. It helps justify, we can say, instead of spending $30 million to replace the shops, we can buy a site for 10 and spend 5 to redevelop and save money in the meantime and get more in the end, if those kind of opportunities arise.
Okay. And maybe just to be a little forward looking on all those options when they do come forward to council, we'll be getting a nice little net present value of costs and everything like that. I do love myself a spreadsheet there.
Through the chair to councillor Wesley, we will be giving as much breakdown as we can in terms of what the benefits are for the different opportunities as they come.
And maybe just one last thing before I pass it on. About you're mentioning site deficiencies being impacted. I wonder if you give me something a little bit more tangible, like an example or something like that.
Through the chair to councillor Wesley, I think a lot of it is it's the site efficiency more than deficiency. The fact that you have the core site, and then you have these two little wings off in the side that have a very narrow choke point to get to them. So you have stuff off in the back corner that you're taking the loader in one direction while somebody's coming the other direction. Sight lines aren't great because they're tucked behind parking lots and buildings. So those are safety issues that come up. And then just the efficiency of being able to move, trying to store material, tripping over each other a little bit. I won't say tripping, that's the wrong wording, but you're over top of each other a fair bit trying to fight for the available spaces.
Because just remember, Councillor Harris has already filed a complaint with bylaw enforcement. We don't want to add tripping to this whole mix. Anyway, thanks a lot, Grant. I'll pass it off.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rendawa.
Hi, Grant. Thank you very much for the presentation. I guess there's about 29 items, or capital projects as part of this. Does administration kind of agree in all 29 of them, or are there some that we believe yes in the report and some we don't? And I guess that question is just coming from, do we take this report as administration signed off on this is the way forward or not?
Through the chair to councillor Rendawa, so in the development of this report, administration from all the business units sat down and went through it about 3 times, about the third iteration of the layout and the report. And these are the things we think we're going to need over time. Again, it's not we need them tomorrow, and some of that timing is going to change based on what's available and what can happen when. But these are the things that we believe will be required over time.
Okay. And then maybe a question, I'm not sure if it's for yourself or for the rest of administration. Can you get me up to speed on how do we do this in practicality? Like when we get reports like this that have multiple capital budget items over a long-term horizon, does council ever like adopt or accept this report as a plan going forward so that these items come into our capital plan, or are we just going to have to debate these individually every year at capital?
Through the chair to Councilor Randhawa. So what we'll do is we'll slot them into the 10-year plan, and then as well as the horizon list on the bottom of the plan. And then council adopts that. We'll have that discussion, I think, in June and at council or at budget as well. We look at those plans, and then council would adopt the 10-year plan, or accept the 10-year plan. I'm not sure the exact terminology, but something like that. So that would be when we would discuss moving one out or moving them in, or how that would work. It would be at that time. So not a discussion on each project every year, but as they come forward through the plan.
Okay. I guess just to throw my 2 cents in here, I appreciate the comprehensiveness of the report. Some things I completely agree with, whether it's that Park Squansit that needs to be replaced. Like when I did a tour of the site, you see our equipment just sitting there, whether it's under a couple feet of snow or the Park Squansit is just open air and that equipment in there just freezes all winter. Like I'm not sure that's great for some of our capital assets, and we got to manage that properly and store them somewhere so they're not breaking down all the time. And those things make sense. When I look at this report in the entirety over a longer term horizon and a $60-70 million ask, I honestly don't know if we have the money for that. And that's why I kind of asked about how we look at this at a capital perspective, because I would almost prefer council like debates this plan or at least segments of it before we would just sit every June in capital budget. And the way I kind of look at this is, in a previous role of mine, I consulted for a department that was growing at like double-digit revenue. And when you grow at double-digit revenue, your expenses continue to grow and have to keep up. And whether that's what you put into marketing or staff or technology. And what that department head did was he just kind of constrained the technology budget. And what that resulted in was that everyone had to fight for the tech budget to be able to acquire more revenue and get more things done and improve their project. And the reason for that was it kind of constrained the growth of expenses because everything had to go through this very difficult tech prioritization. And I know it's not apples to apples, but I wonder if that is something that uses this parks, if we don't continue to expand this parks yard at the pace that's outlined here, maybe that will serve as like a guardrail or a constraint for council of how fast the expenses grow in that department. So I agree with some things, but some things I'm hesitant. But thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Still on round 1. I'll go to Mayor Macon next.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure you answered most of my questions, Grant, so thank you for your previous responses. Sorry. I guess my only questions I have left really are on next steps. So when I'm looking at the report, in immediate term by 2027, so are we expecting to get an ask in 2026, or do you expect it to come, the first ask to come at budget for 2027?
Through the chair to Mayor Macon. So the first ask will be the Parks Quonset replacement. And that'll be, we have to do some work to find out exactly what that looks like to price it out. So it'll either be in the 2027 budget ask or in the 2028 budget ask is when we'll be bringing that forward.
Okay, and then kind of, I would assume simultaneously monitoring land availability for the next steps. We kind of have by 2030, but that really is probably subject to what comes available or not comes available, and then we have to move forward at some point. Would that be fair?
Yeah, through the chair to Mayor Macon, it'll be one of those things that's going to be a little bit fluid on that that big chunk as to when that makes sense. If the right site comes up in the next 2 years, we may come back forward to say we should jump on this. If it's nothing comes forward by 2030, we'll look, is this now the right time to start redevelopment, or do we give it a couple more years to see if something comes?
Okay,
So we'll have to, that piece we'll have to play a little bit, but for now, we'll put it into the plan, into the 10-year plan, so that it's not just thrown on the side of the desk and forgotten about.
so will it go in the 10-year capital plan as a possible land purchase with an amount, or will it go in as what has been, as if we were gonna redevelop the existing site? Or will we see a little bit of both?
I think
With
my
an
intent,
asterisk.
would be to put it as redevelopment,
Okay,
which is the big number. But then if we find a piece of land to come forward, then we can say, by doing this, then we can reduce this project by this, and it's a net saving or a net expense of X.
okay,
But having that out there, because that is potentially the worst case scenario, I guess. I don't know when we use those terms, but that would be kind of where that goes.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to inject myself in before I go to Councillor Nguyen. So as I look at this and you talk about putting this into the capital budget, and we haven't had our strategic planning meeting yet, but within the report it says by 2035, including the demolition of the JEG building. I would not want to see that in the 10-year capital budget, because the one that comes to us in for 2027, that would take us to 2037. So I could see that in our horizon list maybe, but if I see that in there, I'll be far more vocal at the capital budget. My biggest concern that I have when I look at this is there's a lot of priorities that are happening within the city right now. The new council hasn't had an opportunity to actually sit down and have that conversation about what it is that we want to see go forward and not. And this isn't really talking to you, it's talking past you. When we talk about road widening, when we talk about an arena, we talk about all these other projects. And because we're already building the fire hall and the pool, there is no more debenture money. So when anybody comes in with a wish list for me, they're going to have to come in with where that money's going to become available, because I don't see that coming available for a lot of years. And how we stretch things out between now and then, that's going to be a real job for council. So I agree we need to take a stronger look at the capital budget, but I wouldn't want to see projects as big as a demolition of a building that I moved into in 1993 being demolished, because that building was actually designed to be replicated, to have a second building built exactly the same of it. So it's always disappointing for me when we build buildings that even City Hall meant to go higher, and then we said, no, it'll cost too much. So just some concerns that I have about when we see anything in the capital budget, I'm going to have real concerns that it's not taking priority over some of our community needs as well. And I understand staff need the tools, and we give them the tools, but maybe you need to get another parking lot and have a little shuttle bus that you bus them over to or something. Not everybody's expected to drive to work, and I know it's out in the area, but I'm just making my comments that I don't know where the money's going to come from, and I don't see it taking precedence over some of the other projects. So those are my comments. Councillor Nguyen, you're on round one.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with some of these comments on capital funding. It's not news to you either, so I'm gonna have to navigate it as it goes. But it's good to be aware of this and have this information at the tip of our fingers, I think. One question that I want to ask is about future site selections. I would agree, and eventually we're going to need another site with growth. It's inevitable. We have the Helmut Ritter Fire Station site, and it's under a section titled proximity to key locations. There's a bit of a conflict in wording, which is that we want to stay close to the primary public works yards, and then it says should be situated near areas identified for future development. So why wouldn't we actively be engaging with developers on the south end of the existing development to see if we could potentially secure land in that area, given that's where all of the expansion is going to occur.
Um,
And maybe they could debenture one of those 5-acre parcels for us. No interest.
through the chair to Councilor Noy, and that is something we'll be doing. We'll be looking at, there still is the balance, as you said, of the Helmuth Ritter site. There's within the growth for that area, there's a reservoir required, so you could add land to that potentially. There's all those different options, but we needed the plan first to know what we needed. So that's
Yeah.
what we're trying here, and then we're not writing anything off. I think it depends what you're looking to put out in those sites. It would make a lot of sense probably to have a park satellite yard out there, because that way you're not taking the small equipment all the way across the city to try and service an area out there and then drive it back. It's those kinds of things are things that that we're looking at and Public Works is looking at, and will be considered as we move through this.
Yeah, fair enough. And the reason I asked about that is just want to make sure that we're forward looking ahead of the game, really. And I think, securing a location is probably the first step in future development with this, which is what you've said through your report as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harrison, round two.
Grant, where are we sitting with the materials handling site? I think it was the 2 councils ago approved that project, and it seems to have kind of gone away. Where are you sitting with that?
Through the chair to Councilor Harris, so we just through the winter here received a report with recommended locations. So we're starting those negotiations with landowners, and then we'll come back to council with a recommendation to purchase and move forward.
That seems like it's kind of like been lost in the shuffle. I would have thought we would have been dealing with it. Now, I'm asking a question because I have concerns about snow dumping cost for hauling snow to the Ardrossan snow dump site. But in the context of looking for a materials handling site, are we anticipating, if that's the case, that it's just like for gravel and for wood and miscellaneous things that we use in our production? Or are we looking at the potential of housing some of our site or equipment or our staff or equipment at the materials handling? Now, respecting it's further away from the growth area, but it's still in the city.
The intent with that report and that plan is to look at materials handling plus potential for snow dump.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a site that whether we can get an option on future lands or buy the whole site to accommodate everything at once. That is part of the discussion we'll have as we're talking through the landowners. So we haven't made that final decision yet, and it could be that maybe there's some of, as you said, you move that becomes part of a satellite yard for some of the bigger equipment if it's not too far away. Those kinds of things.
Yeah, I don't really see having a second site for, as you said, some of our equipment we don't necessarily want to drive around, closer to use. I don't necessarily want to see that in Southport, personally. I don't think it's consistent with some of the land uses that would be adjacent to unless it was in a commercial area. And so ultimately I look at it from the standpoint, would we stay in the industrial area, light industrial where we are now, or do we go to this area where I asked the question about the materials handling to look at that as a potential redevelopment site in terms of housing? Because definitely it would give us a heck of a lot more room now if we bought in that context. Does that make sense?
It may. Again, we haven't gotten that far in terms of all the discussions, but that is definitely an option if we're looking at a satellite yard. It would be, again, within lands that are zoned for that kind of work. So that's good. That would be an option, yes.
Okay, well, I have some thoughts on snow dump. That's off of this particular topic, but it's relevant in terms of acquisition of land for municipal uses, and that ultimately is what we're talking about here. So thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. That'll take you off the hook. And yeah, I'd raise my eyebrows too. Committee of the Whole's very hard. Well, we're allowed to do feedback and comments and everything, and I understand it's sometimes difficult. But thank you for coming out and providing your vision of the future. Next item that we have is unhoused support response. Jennifer Hoyer and Corrine Reiner. And Rayner.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Jennifer Hoyer, and I'm the Director of Family and Community Support Services. And here with me today is Corrine Rayner, Director of Protective Services. Sorry, Corrine. We are here to provide Council with information regarding the city's unhoused support response. This will include a summary of community supports available, existing response measures from Protective Services, and any gaps or trends that have been observed. Through shared data and observation, administration has identified around 10 individuals living unhoused in Fort Saskatchewan. This number can fluctuate up and down slightly, but has remained fairly consistent over the last couple of years. Although each individual has a unique situation, addiction and mental health are considered primary contributing factors to houselessness within Fort Saskatchewan. These factors, as well as the systems needed to address them, provide significant barriers for individuals seeking housing. The City of Fort Saskatchewan has two primary departments that interact with individuals facing houselessness: FCSS and Protective Services. These departments work closely to ensure that no matter where the individual presents, they receive a holistic and supportive response. FCSS is mandated to provide prevention services which are voluntary in nature. When working with individuals that are living unhoused, this means connecting them to resources appropriate for their needs and assisting with complex systems like financial supports. In addition, we collaborate with local agencies to ensure that individuals are offered any support that may help shift the situation they are facing. If individuals are seeking shelter services, a taxi is provided to shelter in Edmonton. Social supports in Fort Saskatchewan operate during regular business hours and are not intended to provide crisis intervention. This means that in a crisis situation, Protective Services is called upon to assess the situation. I will now turn it over to Corrine for the Protective Services response.
Good afternoon, Council. Protective Services takes a coordinated approach to calls for service involving unhoused individuals. We work in collaboration with the RCMP, Municipal Enforcement Services, Family and Community Support Services, as well as Public Works. The aim is to balance public safety, bylaw compliance, and respect for individual rights, ensuring that offering appropriate referrals to supports happens for people that are experiencing complex needs. What a response might look like is either an RCMP member or a municipal enforcement officer will engage with individuals and respond to calls for service. These officers are very engaged with these individuals, and they get to know them by name, and they build trust and relationships with our unhoused individuals and really take a compassionate approach at dealing with each situation. The Protective Services response and best practices consist of responding to all calls for service, regular patrols looking for encampments or tenting or people in need of assistance. We've developed and started an agent to property program through municipal enforcement, which will allow any municipal enforcement officer or RCMP officer to attend a business and immediately act to remove a person from the premises. It just speeds up things for businesses, so that's really been helpful. The RCMP engaged the RPACT team, so these are the Regional Police and Crisis Team. This is for mental health related calls for service and calls that are reoccurring. So if we have one individual where we are repeatedly dealing with, we can contact the RPACT team and they will come and do an assessment. Officers must balance the need to address public safety and bylaw concerns with their legal obligation to respect individuals' charter rights, ensuring that any enforcement action taken is lawful, proportionate, and appropriate to the behavior that's observed. We have conducted a community scan from RCMP and municipal enforcement data of documented interactions with individuals who are living unhoused in the community. We look at the number of individuals, the demographics, criminal involvement, and the total calls for service. Overall, the calls are generally non-violent in nature, and there is a relatively low volume of criminal files associated to our unhoused residents. Some of the demographics of the unhoused individuals is that the average age is 38 years old. 40% 40% of them are female and 60% are male. As Jennifer has said, approximately 10 people are regularly interacting with our services and known to be unhoused. This number does fluctuate throughout the year. We will see as many as 5 or 6, and it can go up to usually 14 or 15 people that we're regularly interacting with. Although we're not seeing a significant increase in the number of individuals, we are seeing an increase in the workload or call volume that is associated to RCMP and municipal enforcement. Municipal enforcement calls went up from 81 files in 2024 to 235 files in 2025, which is a 190% increase. These files consist of loitering, trespassing, camping, or sleeping in public spaces. The increase can be attributed to a higher level of reporting from the community, as well as typically we will have 1 or 2 individuals, and depending on the state of crisis that they might be in, causing a lot of those interactions. So 1 or 2 may make up a lot of the call volume. Municipal enforcement usually takes the majority of these calls for service, but the RCMP respond as well, and they do assist us in many instances. They have also seen a 37% increase in their calls for service. We have not seen any significant encampments. However, tenting and sleeping in businesses and parks and public spaces, sometimes our facility bath washrooms are utilized a lot, and that's where calls for service come from. So those are the things. We've only had one area where it was kind of a significant type of an encampment that was set up that had to be dismantled. The rest is just typically tenting. So I'll now turn it back over to Jennifer for some of the identified gaps that we are seeing.
A key gap identified is that frontline officers are often the first point of contact for individuals experiencing mental health, addiction, or social crises, even when those situations are not enforcement-based. In these cases, referrals to local supports are typically provided. However, because many of these services are voluntary, they are not always accessed once the immediate crisis has de-escalated. Municipal supports are designed to work alongside services delivered by other levels of government. Currently, delays and capacity challenges within health sector systems, such as mental health treatment, addiction services, housing and income supports, limit the effectiveness of some municipal level responses. In addition, legal thresholds must be met before enforced intervention can occur. This can result in limited response options when individuals decline services but do not meet the criteria for enforcement, leaving fewer tools available to address underlying needs. Administration will continue to monitor trends related to service demand, repeated interactions, and resource pressures associated with the unhoused population. This includes tracking data to better understand impacts on service levels and workloads across departments. Potential future considerations may include options such as a police and crisis team or enhanced social supports embedded within protective services. These approaches are being monitored in other jurisdictions, and any consideration of similar models locally would be brought forward through the business planning and budget process. Administration also wants the public to be aware of how they can respond if they encounter an individual who may need assistance. To support this, digital and print resource guides have been shared with local businesses, community agencies, and through the city's website and social media channels to help residents connect individuals to appropriate services. Thank you for your time today, and we would be happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much for the presentation. I'll open it up for questions. Mayor Macon first.
Thank you for your presentation, ladies. I had a couple questions written down here. In your report, you talk about many departments and teams working together. Does that different groups of individuals, do they meet in person to discuss what's happening, or is there just kind of like a set up criteria of like how each one of them are going to respond, or do we ever get together to discuss like what the current status is and what's going on?
Through the chair to your Mayor Macon, yes, we have had meetings where we get all of the individuals in a room and discuss the challenges that we are seeing. And then we've also set up recent meetings where FCSS and Protective Services are meeting monthly to keep on track of things, talk about the referrals, talk about this different things that each department is seeing.
Okay. Thank you for that. One of the things that I'm hearing that I guess maybe differs from the numbers that we see in this report is a lot of the trail users, especially in the summer, starting in the springtime, are saying that they're seeing an increasing volume of encampments down along the river valley. And those are really tough for us to enforce or to even find, but it's I guess, added a level of discomfort to them running alone or biking alone. But when you talk to them, the numbers are quite a bit higher than maybe we report here. And they speak of, you know, having municipal enforcement or the RCMP doing a great job coming in and removing an encampment, only to have the same individual set up 150 meters down 2 hours later. So I guess, like, how do we get ahead of that going into the spring and summer months and try not to make it a very welcoming area for these individuals to set up camp in an area that is really kind of isolated from us, but we do have lots of users and residents and kids.
Through the chair to Mayor Macon, it is a problem that we're probably not going to solve. Unhoused and is a situation where we can't enforce our way out of this, and people choose to live this way. So essentially, from an enforcement standpoint, all we can do is respond to those calls for service. So I do encourage residents to please report it when they see it. Down in the river valley, we have the ability to use the RCMP's drone, so we will be able to utilize that to look for those types of encampments. Essentially, the approach is that we engage and we move them along, and so yes, we're not moving them out of the area. We are just displacing them. We're managing the entrenchment of that encampment and moving it along. Is about all that we can do. We're finding that the court system is not conducive to helping us with that, and those types of enforcement actions that are taken, those charter rights are really considered within the courts, and so there's not a lot we can do with that. Yeah.
Thank you for your response.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wesley.
All right. Before I forget, Jennifer, I was at a Heartland Housing Foundation meeting yesterday, and the folks there were telling me how wonderful you are. And so I thought I'd just relay that over, and I took the compliments on your behalf. So thanks for making Fort Saskatchewan look good
Thank you.
over there, at least. Just reflecting back to the 10 folks that we were talking about that are unhoused, are they a recurrent same 10, or does the mix change much?
Through the chair to Councillor Wesley, it is generally the same. We do see a bit of a fluctuation in the summer months where folks maybe come out here to live in tents, as we heard Mayor Macon allude to, that they do move on in the winter months, but that core group that is out here most times is generally the same.
Okay. And just thinking about the 190% increase in calls for ME and 37% increase in calls for RCMP, do you have any kind of maybe a back of the napkin idea of how much these 10 folks cost?
Well, I could do some rough math.
I love math, Corrine, you know
no,
that.
I know you do, but you know, I was doing some analysis of the amount of hours, I guess, for municipal enforcement services. I can't really speak to the RCMP, and you know, each file. So we had 235 files for calls for service, and they can roughly take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour and a half to half of a day to respond and deal with. So you know, that's approximately 20% of one FTE. Currently, right now, is what that would equate to, if that helps.
Okay. No, that helps a bit. Thank you.
You're good?
I am good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blissard.
Thanks for the presentation. That was very good reading. Lots of information in there. It's not an easy issue. I have been to cities where you're tiptoeing around people sleeping in doorways of closed businesses, not just closed, but derelict businesses and stuff. And I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable with it in our hometown either. There is no easy fix. I always think if there was, anytime someone comes to talk to me, I go, if you have the answer, every city will come and hire you to fix it because there is no fix. The courts are not on our side, if you want to call it that, because these people have rights and you can't no longer put them in Alberta Hospital because we don't agree with how they live. But having said all that, I appreciate all the information. If everyone just did as we were told, there'd be no need for a police department. So everything costs. I mean, it's hard. I know we can analyze it, but if we all lived and were nice to our neighbors and followed all the rules, and when we decide a speed limit, everyone drove it, we wouldn't need bylaw or RCMP. But that's not the case. They're needed for more than just homeless. It's all around. Lots of people need the presence of them to make sure that rules are followed. What do we do when we come across someone that's, and I'm going to say under 18, I don't know if it's 16 is the age, but when we come across a minor, do we just say, well, that's their choice, or is there a legal thing that we have to do more with them? Because I would hate for a 14-year-old to be like, well, that's your choice. We have a legal obligation, I think, there, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Blizzard, you're correct. And anyone that is under the age of 18, then there is Child and Family Services, so a provincial agency that would look into that file and do, there might be a removal of that individual or housing. Jennifer can probably speak a little bit more to what it is that they would do. But yes, Child and Family Services would get involved if it was somebody that is like 14 years of age then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to hear. You mentioned about discussion. I think that was a question asked of this side of it. Is there would it be a benefit to have a wraparound service with one of these people, like where hey, can we meet you somewhere? Or is that a difficult conversation and they're uncomfortable? And I guess part of it is their background, but it might work for some.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Blizzard, we definitely try to do that where we can, when there's an established relationship or when the individual is responsive to voluntary services. So we try to interact, and FCSS is certainly involved with approximately one file a week in which we're working a little more closely and trying to figure out how we can do that and engage other services. One of the biggest issues is that those types of services are voluntary. And so if a person at any point doesn't want to work with them, they don't have to. They have that right until we get to the enforcement, until they've broken a law or we can use enforcement of some sort. So certainly we try to do that, and that is also what we're monitoring in other jurisdictions where they have implemented some supports that are a little greater than what we have here. Maybe their issue is a little larger, and so they've already implemented a support. And so we're monitoring that to see the outcomes that they have as well.
Okay, well, thanks for all you guys do. Actually, I do have one more, if I can. So I'm on the library board, and so we've had discussions about, the patrolling the hallway in front and, whose responsibility it is. They're looking into it. But should people have extra training, the ones that are maybe doing the monitoring? Or like, to me, if I was, a library clerk and you're asked to go and check the washrooms, I mean, that can be a scary thing if I don't have the know-how of, okay, I found someone, now what?
Yeah. Through the chair to Councillor Blizzard, I'll speak to the library first and then our portion of that. I know that the library does engage in a great deal of training on this matter, and certainly is invited to anything that we are aware of or that we're hosting ourselves, because you're right, it's not something that typically librarians have gotten into that business for, and so providing that extra training is appropriate. In regards to monitoring the lobby, FCSS does extra walkthroughs every day, and we also have the cameras that monitor all of the spaces in the front, so that if we do see somebody who's in a difficult situation or needing some support, we can get on that quite quickly.
And our staff gets enough training, the ones that are, maybe have access to some of those that come in there?
To Councillor Blizzard, yes, there is definitely training provided, as well as often many of these staff come in with a certain level of training as well.
Okay,
And we're,
thank you.
I should add, we are able to call on municipal enforcement if we ever require that level of support.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to inject myself in next. So, question for you. You talk about mental health addiction. Is the addiction drugs? Is it alcohol? Is it a combination? What is it we're talking about?
To the chair, we definitely see a combination of things happening, a combination of substances being used. I would say that what municipal enforcement and RCMP are responding to is often interaction with drugs.
With drugs? Drugs?
Drugs, yeah.
Okay, so I got to ask this question. So if you pick somebody up, they're loaded up on drugs. Is there no way to find out where they're getting these drugs from and stop where they're the source? Because if they can't get them, then they're going to have to go to something else. So it's a question I've had in my mind for a long time. Like, why aren't we trying to get rid of the source?
Through the chair, you're correct. So our RCMP officers would typically be the ones engaging in that type of an investigation. We have our traffic and crime reduction unit who do focus on the drugs in town, I guess you could say, and they will as much as they can get information and then go to the source. So those are parts of their investigations that they conduct.
Okay, I just had to throw that out there because I'm always, if you've got them in lockup, watch Law and Order. We'll get the source. Question: how many trips to Edmonton would we send to people, and how many would they be allowed, or is it they go in and the next day they're back out here in the fort?
Through to the chair. So this year, Municipal Enforcement and FCSS, I guess we provided 4 rides through the winter months into a shelter. And we did note that at least 3 of them did come back into the community once it warmed up a little bit. So yeah, that's what we've done so far this year. We offer it to everyone that we come in contact with, or the officers offer it. And 4 of them did take us up on getting a ride to the shelter.
Okay, thanks. Last question I have. When I hear you talking about Charter of Rights, I understand they have a Charter of Rights, but do our general public not have a Charter of Rights where it's about living in a safe community, it's about not being subjected to people who are drunk in parks, who are on drug in parks, who are, I think, in facilities causing disturbances. And I guess just when I read that in the report, I understand they have the Charter of Rights allows for freedom of movement and speech and things like that. But I think the Charter of Rights also requires us to ensure that we are having safety for our community, and that this isn't, that as long as our bylaws and our policies provide that you're prohibited from sleeping in a park, you're to be removed. You can't be drunk in a park. You can't be on drugs in a park. You can't be in a recreation facility on drugs, those sorts of things. So I'm just going to say, when we write these reports, I'd like to see the balance for what the Charter of Rights for our citizens are as well. No comment required. Councillor Andawa?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jennifer and Corinne, for the information. Appreciate the work FCSS as well as Protective Services and our officers do every day. It's a very difficult issue. It's a delicate issue, and I think Councillor Blizzard said it earlier, but it's an issue that nobody's really solved yet, and everybody just tries to do the best that they can. I have a question kind of around, you mentioned there's about a core 10 or so individuals. I want to say out of that 10, there's probably 1 individual that's been around here for as long as I can remember. And we've received, I think, a letter from a local establishment that documented, I think, 50 or so incidents over the last 4 years with that same individual. I've heard it from others just throughout town. I was at the Dr. Turner Lodge once a number of months ago, and a couple of senior residents remarked about that same individual there. I just wonder, at a certain point, do they not hit a threshold where they've actually done something illegal or created safety concerns for other residents that something can be done? I don't quite understand that one, to be honest.
Through the chair to Councillor Randawa. So yes, each individual is assessed on what their behavior is contributing to, whether they're crossing the legal thresholds of whether an arrest can be made. We have the RPACT unit who does assessments on individuals that we're repeatedly seeing, and so they will engage with that individual. And so those things, all of the things that are within our power, when an arrest needs to be made, it is made. An investigation will happen if someone is causing disturbances, doing anything illegal that we can then intervene in. However, you know, people that cause others a discomfort, that is a different level that, you know, that we, because it causes discomfort in the community, we can't intervene in those cases. But when they do break the law, then they are dealt with.
Okay, I appreciate that. I wouldn't say it's discomfort I've heard from individuals. I remember talking to a senior at our Turner Lodge, and they said they were being shouted at and chased across like a street, and they were like 80, 90 years old or something, and you know they can only move so fast. So it's quite a scary incident for some individuals, and but that's, I appreciate that information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Still on round one, Councillor Nguyen.
There we go. Thank you. I just wanted to get an idea of maybe progress that has been made. There's only a handful of people that are living this type of life currently in Fort Saskatchewan, and maybe if you could make a comment on if there has been any progress and willingness of these people to access the resources that would be offered to them, and or if we actually see this, you know, entering into the summer right now, increasing because these people know others likely in their position. So yeah, and I know you do a great job of providing them all the options available to them, and I would hope that some of them see the light and want to pursue those.
Through the chair to Councillor Nguyen. I would say progress is a interesting thing to try to report on in this situation, but if we want to talk a little bit about, we're not seeing a whole lot of growth in our number here, and I think that is a positive thing. That shows some of the early work and the prevention work that we do is helping individuals who may be risk of falling into homelessness, that we're preventing that from happening. In terms of, we definitely have had, you know, maybe 2 or 3 folks over the last couple of years who connected with services and moved on to a service that we referred them to. However, we don't necessarily know how that turns out after. So to report that there has been progress for them, I can't say that for sure, but they have connected with a service that they've been referred to. Will we see an increase in the summer months? That is the pattern that has been shown to us over the last couple of years. Again, people come when they are coming out of the areas that have those warm shelter supports and want to tent. So it's possible, and we'll definitely be monitoring that and continuing to ensure that while we provide support, we're clear that that there are certain laws that need to be abided to here in Fort Saskatchewan.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. And maybe you could just make a quick comment, because I know you do work maybe with youth and young families, where it's sort of a preventative approach or to development of people that would land in these types of scenarios. So can you maybe just make a short foray or give us an idea of what your work looks like that, and you're in that department, and what kind of you're using as resources to find that success?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Nguyen, thank you for the opportunity to talk about some of the services that we have here. And so it looks different for different folks, but when we're talking about youth, for example, if we can build their skills to seek gainful employment, as well as building their coping strategies and resiliency and connections in this community, that's protective factors to keep them from falling into homelessness. If we can connect young parents with support programs to ensure that their mental health is taken care of in a time where it's at risk, that again for us is connecting or is supporting folks for not falling into homelessness, which is definitely FCSS's main priority when we talk about the in-house population, is to prevent folks from falling into that. So depending on what they're coming or what population we're working working with, we're always looking at what protective factors can we build in these folks so that if they encounter difficulties along the way or, bumps in the road, they have the skills they need to prevent them to fall into that crisis.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to round two. Mayor Macon.
Thank you. So I know you talked about this in your presentation, and it's that missing piece where officers are attending mental health calls, right? And they aren't really the experts in that. And, I've experienced that too, when dealing with someone with mental health and calling the RCMP because I really had no other recourse to do, but feeling bad about that, right? Because I know that that's not, really what they're there for. So I guess my question would be what is the piece there that they were missing? If money was no object and you could have that missing piece, is it having a social worker available to the RCMP right in that moment to attend with them? Is that the person that's missing? What could we aim for?
Through the chair to Mayor Macon, yes, that is the piece that is missing, is having a mental health practitioner or a social worker right there with them that can help them in a crisis moment and in that with that call to service, as well as the wraparound and then the continuity of care and the follow through with that, because often our RCMP officers or municipal enforcement, mostly the RCMP, will show up to those mental health calls for service. They will deal with that crisis situation and then they leave. And then, so it's that wraparound services that would be very beneficial.
Okay. Go
Through
ahead.
the chair, I'd just like to add that that would definitely be something that we're looking at for the future, whether or not that would support. But I want to add that it's also about what the supports that we get these individuals to. And we are seeing complexities and difficulties from supports that are provided by other levels of government. So it is wonderful if we have somebody on site and we may be able to get them to access that, but we also need somewhere to take folks to, or to that further support that is needed. We need that to be reliable. And I just want to ensure that we know that there is difficulty happening across the continuum of care, and that we have a piece of that, but not the whole piece.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wesley.
Yeah, I wonder if I could just follow up a little bit of what Mayor Macon just said. Of these 10 unhoused folks, do you think they're open to this kind of help? In your professional, learned opinion, Jennifer?
Through the chair to Councillor Wesley, I think readiness for change for folks that are dealing with these big issues like mental health and addiction is fairly precarious, and it's a moving target, if you will. If folks are ready for that, we're there to support them. But when we continue to see the visible representation of houselessness in Fort Saskatchewan, I think that indicates that for whatever reason, that individual is not at a place of readiness.
Okay, awesome. And maybe just one other question, just to put the 10 in context, compared to maybe other cities, whether it's Leduc or Strathcona County or Sherwood Park, whatever, how would we compare? Do we have rough numbers for those municipalities?
Through the chair to Councillor Wesley, I don't have their numbers here with us today. However, we do when we talk to our regional partners all of the time, both Protective Services and FCSS. And I would say the concerns we're dealing with here would be at the lower end of what we're seeing with other municipalities in the region.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I've got one last question. It's not so much with the unhoused, but those that are on the cusp of it. So would those ones be more working with our FCSS or Families First to ensure that they don't fall into homelessness? And I only ask that because there's a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck, and as expenses continue to rise, whether it's gas or groceries and rent, how do we make sure that we don't end up forcing more people into homelessness?
Yeah, to the chair, that's a definite concern. ourselves, FCSS, as well as other agencies, do our best to get information out to public about what we do offer. The earlier that folks begin that conversation and we can support, that is of course the best case scenario. When somebody comes to us with an eviction notice, it's more difficult than if they say, I'm having trouble each month, let's sit down and figure this out. We do share through public education, as well as going into like providing supports to the food bank, for example, to the Nourishment Center, giving them information so they can share that with individuals that are accessing their services. We provide our information to the hospital. We're in different facilities in Fort Saskatchewan providing information, as well as just making connections so that we can meet as many people who might benefit from that earlier support. And like I said, hopefully they come to us at that earlier planning stage.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation here today. Keep up the good work. All right, thank you. Next one is Community Standards Bylaw. We have Corrine Rayner again and Ben Sharp. Everybody's okay without a break? Yeah, we're good. Okay. We've only been an hour and 10 minutes, so. I'm usually an hour and 30 minutes.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and members of Council. I'm Sergeant Ben Sharp, Supervisor with Municipal Enforcement for the City. And beside me to assist with this presentation and any questions is Corrine Rayner, Director of Protective Services. We're here today to present an updated Community Standards Bylaw. The City's Community Standards Bylaw was last updated in 2021. And since that last update, several areas have been identified as requiring updates, amendments, or additions. Today we'll be welcoming Mayor and Council's feedback on the updates to the bylaw, with the next steps being returning April 14th, 2026 for 3 readings. A 2025 initiative of the strategic plan was for administration to develop a new assessment subclass for properties that would meet the definition of derelict. On March 18th, 2025, administration recommended updating the Community Standards Bylaw to enhance provisions dealing with properties that would meet this definition. Our department has conducted a full review of the Community Standards Bylaw and have implemented amendments and additions to support community safety, property maintenance, derelict properties, and public conduct. The main issue that our department receives reports of continues to be in relation to unsightly properties or premise. As you can see in the diagram before you, the majority of our enforcement of the Community Standards Bylaw comes in this area. Our department does see a high rate of compliance as we focus on education and working with property owners to resolve the issue prior to moving towards fines or penalties. Fines and penalties are typically issued to repeat offenders or non-compliance with issued enforcement orders. All of the regulations related to unsightly properties and derelict properties within this updated Community Standards Bylaw are included in Section 7. Our department's philosophy when addressing unsightly premises is an educational approach followed by enforcement action if required, either through fines or enforcement orders to remedy. As a department, we pursue voluntary compliance. When dealing with an unsightly property, our department starts with an issued warning or education. If the issue is not resolved, our team typically moves towards the issuance of a fine and an enforcement order. The enforcement order will clearly lay out what conditions the property is currently in and in contravention of within the bylaw, and what needs to be remedied. Our department does see high levels of compliance, whether at the warning or education stage or the enforcement stage. It is rare that our department deals with a property that fails to comply with the enforcement order. However, this does happen, and if an enforcement order fails to meet compliance, the city will remedy the issue or the contravention with the cost billed back to the property owner. As mentioned, administration recommended updating the community standards bylaw to address the issue specifically of derelict properties. Our department took this on and found that approximately at that time, 4 properties within the city would fall into this category. Since that time, 2 of these properties have been removed, leaving 2 that would potentially fall within this category at this time. To address this issue, we developed a few new provisions within this bylaw. 1, there's a provision added to define derelict property and implementing that an owner must not let a property become derelict in nature. With this comes an increased fine amount to act as both a deterrent and accurately reflect the violation. While conducting our research of what properties would currently fall into this category, we also noticed that several of them had multiple violations and enforcement actions taken. This prompted us to implement a new section related to chronic nuisance properties. This section allows us to designate a property as a chronic nuisance if it reaches a predetermined threshold of enforcement action taken. When a property is designated as chronic nuisance, any fine issued is double the fine amount that's listed in the specified penalty. These additions created a tiered system of enforcement based on severity. We can now categorize properties as in compliance with the bylaw, not in good repair, derelict, or chronic nuisance. The additions and amendments made to this bylaw help strengthen and give officers the tools to effectively enforce properties that meet these definitions, as well as act as a deterrent. Several new definitions were also added to help address newly identified areas of concern or to strengthen our ability to enforce. One of these definitions being attractant, and this is a newly defined definition to include any substance reasonably expected to attract wildlife, for example, food waste, grain, or pet food. Bird feeders are not considered an attractant under this bylaw. We've also added the definition of bullying or to bully, and it's to support new prohibitions related to the bullying of any young persons. Definition of camping was added, expanded definition covering any temporary structure or vehicle used for habitation. Chronic nuisance property, a new definition tied to the volume of complaints and enforcement actions over a defined period of time. We added derelict building and derelict vehicle within our definitions. These are 2 new ones to provide clear criteria for identifying several severely deteriorated structures and unsafe non-operational vehicles. The definition of wildlife was added, now defined to support the enforcement related to attractants, and young person as defined as a person under the 18 years of age in relation to the bullying provisions. Revisions were also made to the existing sections to assist in the ability to properly enforce, as well as strengthen areas of concern that were identified. Section 7, sub H, sub III, includes updated language changing from inoperable vehicle to derelict motor vehicle. This revision allows our officers to have more teeth when enforcing vehicles that are dilapidated in nature on residents' private property. Section 7, sub K, sub I, speaks to unoccupied buildings and its new wording and separating it out into multiple subsections for improved readability. There were new prohibitions and enforcement tools that were also added within this bylaw. Several new additions were implemented into the updated version, and these prohibitions are in relation to areas identified as requiring regulation and implemented to increase enforcement tools available to our officers. These additions include prohibiting property owners from allowing their properties or buildings to become derelict in nature, a new provision prohibiting littering from a vehicle and linking that offense to a registered owner of a vehicle if they were to just dump on the side of the road, failing to leave property when instructed, and prohibiting bullying or encouraging bullying of a young persons. Other additions included prohibiting intentional or reckless damage to city-owned property, prohibiting camping on city property, and requiring individuals to remove all items when they are directed to leave, as well as prohibiting the use of wildlife attractants on private property. A new section was added to help strengthen enforcement and act as a deterrent for repeat offenders. As mentioned previously, when conducting our research into derelict or unsightly properties, we observed that several of the properties that would fall into this category were repeat offenders, with multiple enforcement actions taken against them. We researched surrounding comparable communities and found that others were implementing a similar approach, creating a chronic nuisance designation for these repeat offending properties. This addition allows for a property to be designated as a chronic nuisance after a defined threshold of complaints or enforcement actions are taken. These thresholds include 6 or more separate verified contraventions of the bylaw within a 6-month period, or 4 or more complaints or enforcement actions within a 48-hour period for separate offenses under the bylaw. Any fine issued to a chronic nuisance property are double the amount listed in the specified penalties. Fines associated with this bylaw range anywhere from $150 to $1,000, and the second offenses are double the first offense. Fine amounts have been determined based on the seriousness of the offense and comparators to other bylaws in the region. This concludes our presentation. Myself and Corrine Rayner are available for any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We've got a full lineup of questions. So we'll start with Councillor Harris first.
Officer Sharp, I understand the need for a bylaw of this type to evolve and for changes to be made. I don't really have any major questions about those. I see it as just an evolution. The question that I have, though, is if a homeowner in our community has a concern with one or more neighbors in their neighborhood with too many vehicles or too many things parked on the driveway, whether they're operable or not, is it the community standards bylaw that you look to for potential direction or resolution? Or what other piece of legislation do you use, parking bylaw or whatever, or the Highway Traffic Safety Act? So what do you do?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, that will be covered within the community standards bylaw. It doesn't speak to the total number of operable vehicles that you can have on your property, but it does speak to the number of inoperable or derelict, as it's defined now, which is a maximum of 1, and they would have to have either a tarp over top of them or within a structure.
Okay,
it would be within the community standards.
So if a vehicle is not operational and it's sitting at the side yard of a property and it's covered with a tarp, that's acceptable?
If it is on the side yard covered within a tarp, it would be correct.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the number of vehicles, so if I've got 4 kids and everybody's got 2.5 cars, that's okay? Parking on the street, parking on the driveway, all that sort of stuff? And this is the legislation that you look to?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, correct. The community standards bylaw doesn't speak to operational vehicles. So if your family had 6 vehicles, they're under this bylaw could be 6 sitting on that driveway.
Okay, so then it just comes down to, I guess it's a subjective consideration as to whether that's a problem, as opposed to whether it's legally an issue. So, thank you. I have an issue I'll discuss with you later. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Macon?
Just a couple minor ones, I think. Just wondering why, so the definition of bullying in it doesn't speak to youth, but why is bullying in the bylaw only against youth? Right, so the only thing that I can see in here where it talks about bullying is that that bullying against youth will inhibit a fine. But is it because if you're an adult that's going to fall to the RCMP, or I just thought it was particular to say youth and not adults?
Through chair to Mayor Macon, that's part of it. We did not want to promote creating our department being used as a weapon between neighbors for a neighbor feud. This was really more to look out for the youth rather than being weaponized between neighbors potentially. And if there was something between neighbors, that would be something RCMP can look at.
Okay. And then that makes sense. So thank you. I just wanted to clarify the bird feeders because in your presentation you said it's not an attractant, but in the policy itself it says when it becomes an attractant. So can you give me an example of that?
Through the chair to Mayor Macon. So the bird feeders are not considered an attractant until they start to attract that wildlife. And wildlife defined as coyotes or moose, deer, whatever that may be. But if it's only attracting birds, which do not fall under the definition of wildlife, then they wouldn't be considered an attractant.
Okay,
It's
so
more
maybe
so
somebody's putting something in there that would attract more than just the birds. Is that fair?
correct. Yes.
Okay.
The main purpose of that section was for individuals putting out on their own private property dog food or food scraps, something of that nature, that's attracting coyotes or other wildlife. And we didn't have a concrete way to deal with that within the current community standards bylaw.
Okay.
So this gives us that teeth to be able to do that.
I know some other people have some questions about the chronic nuisance property, so I'll probably listen to that and then I might have another question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go next on this. So I was the one that brought up the derelict properties, and first I'll say I think you've done a really good job on this bylaw, and it's such a shame, you know, when common sense doesn't prevail, we have to add all this stuff in there, but it gives you the tools to work with. I'm still not certain about the derelict buildings. So thank you for telling us we were at 4 and we're down to 2. So I know the old Mary Major building that I drove by the other day, that greenhouse on 103rd, I think it is. It is all boarded up, but I guess the question that I have is how long do we as a community allow that to sit there, to be derelict, to be boarded up, even if it was to be fenced? I mean, it's been over 30 years that she's been gone, and that house has been abandoned. So I guess that's the question, because I don't know what further steps you can take. Like, so would one like that be subject to fines, or if it's boarded up, not subject to fines?
Through to the chair, that is something that Ben and I looked into, is adding some type of timeline around the vacancy issue. And we're not seeing a timeline put in other bylaws, and we're having a difficulty with that portion of it. So to having that, like you say, you gave an example of that, we don't currently have a timeline around how long a vacant or unoccupied building could be boarded up.
Okay, and I guess I asked the question because I think you've done a good job here, but when I brought this forward the first time, my question is, so like the city of Edmonton said for their derelict properties or properties that have basically been abandoned, they want to hit them with higher and higher taxes so that it encourages them to maybe sell the property off for redevelopment. So I guess, is that a secondary step that we should be looking at? And I realize you're telling me it's only 2. I don't know where the other one is, and I haven't found it yet, but that one I drive by all the time because it's in downtown. So should that be our other option?
Through to the chair, it's something that we can definitely look into, and because we will be bringing this back for 3 readings, and so in between then we can do a little more research. We haven't found anywhere where there is and what would be a timeline, I guess, that would be, you know, for council's consideration, is what would be a reasonable timeline for a house to be either demolished or torn down.
I would think 30 plus years would be a good start. The other question that I have, so a lot of people have home-based businesses, and I think under the business license, they're not supposed to bring their business like big stuff home and be parking it on streets and that. So do we actually do anything with those? And I think it's difficult because people bring their vehicles home from work for other things, but.
Correct. Through through you, Chair. It is something that we both proactively enforce and reactively. We just dealt with one a few months ago of an individual parking quite a few of their work vehicles at their residence, even on their own private drive that they weren't permitted to have parked there. But that would be something that's listed within their business license as to can they have any, and if so, how many can be present.
So that's where they would deal with it then on that one. Last question, third one, those large garbage containers that people get brought in when they're doing a renovation, is there a time limit on how long they can be on a property? And I'm asking about one specific one because it's been there quite some time. And I think they're running a business now and it continues to be there. So is there a timeline on those?
Through to your chair, I believe they'd have to have a permit for that, and potentially their permit may stipulate the length of time that can be there, but I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, that'd be a permit through the city? Okay, I'll check that one out myself then. Thank you. Councillor Wesley?
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Corrine, for everything, and thank you for all the work you do. And I really appreciate all that. Just maybe going back to the bullying issue. I'm just trying to think of how would we distinguish bad behavior from prohibited behavior. So when we think of bullying, at what level does it rise to the point where it becomes enforceable by law?
Through your chair to Councillor Wesley, we'd be falling back on that definition of bullying, and we would just have to provide or gather that evidence that it was aggressive behavior intended to cause physical, emotional, or social harm or harassment to another individual. So it'd just be our investigative process of, is there enough to support that or not?
Okay, so
And just to add to that, sorry, it would be complaint based as well. So the complainant would bring that forward to us to look into. And then if it crossed certain thresholds, then the RCMP would get into harassment types of charges or investigation.
okay. I'm just trying to get a sense for if somebody were to appeal it, get the fine and appeal it, what would be their probability of success in that particular, going that particular avenue.
And through the chair to Councillor Wesley, I'd also like to mention that this isn't a section within the bylaw that we're going to be looking to pursue issuing fines and violations for. We'd be taking a educational approach with this as we are dealing with youth.
Okay, awesome. Just the wildlife attractants. I'm just curious about this. Is this like a big issue? People leaving food in their backyard for coyotes and stuff like that?
Through the chair to Councillor Wesley, not a huge issue, but definitely one that we have come across quite a few times, and we've made note going back a couple of years now that this is something that we would like to implement. When we do get calls for it, it's somewhat of a gray area as to whether it's enforceable or not, and luckily we've received compliance when we've asked individuals to remove that. However, this gives us those tools to actually follow through.
And I'm just curious about why bird feeders are exempted. And the reason why I ask is, Councillor Randall has been pursuing an anti-chicken and anti-bird agenda, and I'm just curious as to why that's been left out.
Through the chair to Councillor Wesley, that was removed because we didn't want to restrict people having bird feeders on their property. We only wanted to restrict that once it became a nuisance and attract other wildlife.
Okay.
Unwanted wildlife.
Just be warned, Councillor Randall will probably be filing a notice of motion on this.
Okay,
I'm
you're
done.
good.
Thank you.
If you're not done, you are done.
Get off.
All right, Councillor Rendawa.
I'll ignore that. Officer Sharp, thank you very much for your presentation on the work you do. I had a question just kind of around the derelict properties, more so for my education. So could you kind of walk me through at a very high level, like how this actually comes to play? Like, let's say I live next to Councillor Wesley and he has a derelict property. How does that go? Does one of the neighbors first call in to municipal enforcement? You go take a look, there are fines, there's education. Like, could you kind of walk me through what that process tends to look like?
Through the chair to Councillor Randhawa, absolutely. It could either be proactive in nature or reactive based off of a complaint, but we would attend the location, we would assess the property, we determine if it is in compliance with the bylaw, if it is in good or not in good repair, where it's just kind of minor things that would need to get fixed up to bring it back up to that community standard, or whether there's severe, serious issues with it in terms of fire damage, structural damage, or whether it's a safety issue as well. And do we need to take steps to make sure that the property and the building is safe? But we would start typically with that education, that warning. And if we don't receive compliance based off of that, we then move to, we have the option of issuing a violation fine or an enforcement order or both. All of those options are open to us. And then once we issue that enforcement order, like I mentioned, it clearly outlines exactly what steps need to be taken to bring that property to within compliance. And there's usually a timeline, or always is a timeline associated with that. They have X amount of time to appeal it, X amount of time to remedy those contraventions. And then if we do gain compliance, it's great, file closed. And if we do not, we then have the opportunity to go in and remedy what was not by the property owner.
Okay, and then if we remedy it, we charge that back to them via fines?
Fines is one avenue, as well as we can actually invoice back what that cost was for us to bring it back up to that community standard. So if we hire in a third-party contractor to do that work, that's billed back to the homeowner.
And in past cases where it's got to that extent, do we actually end up recouping that money back? Like, are these homes owned by somebody that's living there, or they're like difficult to locate? Like, I'm assuming this might be estate issues where an individual has passed away and sometimes, or something like that.
To my knowledge, not aware of any difficulties with that. My understanding is the property owner would receive that invoice first, and if they do not pay that invoice within a certain amount of time, it then gets put onto their tax roll.
Okay, so then we end up collecting it through the taxes. Got you. I guess I wasn't here for the past council, but I guess in 2025, administration did present council with either the property tax subclasses or the bylaw. So this is the bylaw, but is the property tax subclasses then, from my understanding, if we got into that case with a derelict property, we would just charge them a large amount on that property tax to kind of force their hand to either improve the property or like just sell it?
Through the chair to Councillor Randhawa, I believe the property tax subclass means that if a property is deemed derelict, then it would, through the tax assessment, become a derelict property it has its own tax subclass. I do have Erin in the gallery. She can help me answer if I don't answer this properly. So their taxes then would be increased. But it doesn't really remedy the situation. It takes a long time for that financial burden to become such a burden that they don't actually remedy the situation. And that's why we chose to put it into the community standards bylaw, where we can actually have an enforcement action to remedy the situation much quicker.
Got you. Awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blissard.
Thanks for all the information. I think these are really good additions. I do have one question. Actually, a couple. The derelict vehicle, is this brand new on there? Have we never had that? Because I do know there was a property that had quite a few vehicles that looked like, I don't know if they were operating a fix-it shop in the past. It's not there anymore, but is this new, or have we always had a version of this?
Through the chair to Councillor Blizzard, we've always had a version of it. It was called inoperable vehicles. In our current community standards bylaw, we had renamed it to derelict and then changed the definition to give us some more teeth and expand what that a vehicle in that condition is. So yeah, it's been in there before. It's just this gives us a little bit more teeth to actually be able to enforce it, and broadens that range of what that vehicle.
Okay, and back to the wildlife one. So we have a bird feeder, but now squirrels are coming. Are squirrels kind of under that too, or did I miss that? Yeah. Just stop it. So, or are we talking more, you know, coyotes and the more wild squirrels, or just seem to be everywhere?
Correct. That is the intent of it, is more so for the wildlife that would create a safety issue, safety hazard for the community. So your coyotes, moose, deer, things of those nature.
Okay. And you were saying you don't know how much teeth that has, but honestly, they've had bylaws in Banff against bears that you even have to make sure your garbage is secure. I think we would have some teeth in being able to enforce that. Camrose needs it because they have deer and people feed their deer. I don't know if they have a bylaw, but they certainly don't enforce it. But I would think we would be able to do something. And one more question. So I've got a neighbor, he does something, doesn't matter what it is, and I call you because, you know, I'm really unhappy. Other than that, I get along with the neighbor. Does bylaw tell the neighbor who called? Because, you know, that's a big issue. Most of the time, maybe you get along, but because we rely on complaint based, the only way I can deal with the one thing my neighbor's doing is to call bylaw. But if bylaw tells them who called, now we don't have a good neighbor anymore.
Through the chair to Councillor Blizzard, no. We don't release that information when we're speaking with the subject of complaint. We never release who had originally called that in. Now, neighbors may make their own conclusions.
Okay.
A good example would be if we're going to deal with a fence that's just shared between yourself and the neighbor. We're still not disclosing who it was who reported it, but they can connect the dots as
Figure it out, yeah.
to who that is. But
Okay.
no, we don't release that for any of our files, community standards or responsible pet ownership.
Okay.
None
Thank
of that's
you.
released.
Okay, Counselor Nguyen. Second.
Yeah, thanks. Along the similar lines of bullying, I'm just looking for maybe a clarification of the interpretation and what recourse is available for 11A, which seems like a very general and potential police matter or RCMP, I should say, no person shall participate in a fight. And I'm very curious. Is there a ticket that can be given if that occurs? What is the interpretation? It's never something that I've seen fall maybe under the purview of a bylaw. It's definitely not something you think bylaw is involved with. But when is this applied and how?
Through the chair to Councillor Noy, this has always been within our community standards bylaw. This isn't a new addition. It does come with a violation fine that we can issue. And it's just an additional tool that our officers have. Potentially RCMP aren't available to respond to something, and therefore we're able to deal with it. Maybe something more minor in nature that our officers can handle, but has always been part of our bylaw. A tool for our officers to use does have a violation fine associated to it.
And what constitutes a fight? Exactly. Or maybe give me a scenario. It doesn't have to be specific to the incident, but maybe.
Through the chair to Councillor Noy, just to give you a little bit of context, I remember, I think when this was brought in, and there was, the community was dealing with a lot of youth having fight club or that kind of a type of a thing was happening in the community, and so I think that was brought in at this time so that municipal enforcement, you know, along with RCMP could help to deal with that at that time. So that's where the intent of it was initially brought into the bylaw.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Just to tag on to that, there is, in terms of determining what is fight or what constitutes a fight, there is the definition within the bylaw. Means any confrontation involving violent physical contact between two or more people. So.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Harris on round two.
So in a situation where a neighbor is aggrieved by the activities of another neighbor or more than one neighbor, and there is little or nothing you can do because it falls outside of the parameters of our legislative purview, do we have a community mediation program that we might turn to in a situation to get neighbors talking to see if they can find their own remediation of the situation? In other words, don't park in front of the house with your company vehicle or whatever. I mean, do we have a mediation program? Now, respecting that would probably be voluntary, and if you don't want to participate, you won't, but do we?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, we do not have a mediation service in Fort Saskatchewan. We have referred people. There is one out of Strathcona County. We used to utilize our restorative justice team to help us with doing neighbor disputes. They no longer operate out of the fort any longer. So currently, we're without any mediation abilities.
Well, is that and I'm not advocating that we start something like that, but in situations where we have an intractable difference of opinion, and quite often when people sit down and kind of look at it from a different perspective, maybe they can find solutions. Do you think that's something that could be valuable to consider in terms of a service that we offer through either yours or through FCSS?
Through the chair to Councillor Harris, yes, I do find that would be a valuable service in especially for municipal enforcement services when it comes to neighbor disputes. But it is a voluntary type of a thing where both parties need to accept that service and participate in that mediation, which we find sometimes one neighbor is willing and the other is not. But we could definitely benefit from that service in our community.
Okay, thanks. I'll consider that further.
Okay, good. That looks like all the questions. So thank you very much for presenting this here today. I think you've answered pretty well all the questions. I just want to go on record of saying you have a very difficult job. You're going out and talking to these people when they're most upset or they're being applied with one of these rules, and I don't envy your job at all. So thank you for your service and continuing doing what you're doing. I did have the enhanced questions about the derelict properties, but I wouldn't want to slow this process down, so I wouldn't want to hold that up because of that. So, but thank you for coming out today and joining us. All right, are there any member inquiries to administration on anything? If not, I'll take a motion to go in camera. Mayor Macon. Go ahead.
I will make a motion that we go in camera for items under Atia.
He's voting
Thank you.
yes, he just said. Okay, thank you. I'll close the motion. Please cast your vote. And that's carried. So we'll take a 10-minute break. So 4 o'clock.